Hi guys, this is your host Nakasha, mental health consultant. This channel is all about mental health, and on each video I give you guys tips on how you can be intentional in improving your mental health and well-being to achieve the vision you have for your life. So guys, as many, if not all of you know, on Friday, April 9th, we lost DMX Earl Simmons. So it's still early, but what we're hearing right now is that he died after suffering cardiac arrest. Apparently he was rushed to the hospital a week prior, and then on Friday, after being on life support, he died from cardiac arrest. And we're being told that he recently suffered a relapse in substance abuse. So we're being given the impression that the relapse is connected to the cardiac arrest. So I've been a fan of DMX's work since childhood. His music, his movies, those that truly love his work and listen to his lyrics will see that there is a lot of depth and a lot of wisdom to it. On a personal level, one of the things I really valued about DMX's work is that, and even just hearing him speak, whether it's interviews and videos and things like that, he professes his faith quite a bit, and he gives praise to God quite a bit as well in terms of, the different things that he's gone through and where he's at today. So as a fan, all I know about DMX is just a piece of who he was and what he was willing to share with us. So, I definitely feel the loss from a fan perspective, but my heart and my prayers really go out to his children, his family, his loved ones, his close friends, those who truly knew and loved him. And also my heart goes out to the rest of his fans as well, who are also grieving the pain of this loss in our own way. So the reason I'm making this video is based on watching a video that was released from his sister where she talks about the loss, his passing. And something that she really digs deep into is talking about trauma. So she talks about the trauma that led to DMX's substance abuse and ultimately now his death. So again, we're getting the impression that the cardiac arrest that caused his death came from substance abuse relapse. And guys, I'd really encourage you to watch this video. I'm going to link it below. It's very moving, very powerful. And for those that have watched my videos where I talk about PTSD and where I talk about trauma, I'll link those below too. So please take a look at my trauma-based videos, because a lot of things I discuss in those videos are really tied very well to the things that his sister says about her experiences of trauma, as well as his, based on what he shared with her. Now, I don't know what his relationship is with his sister. All we can go from is what she has said that he has directly shared with her in terms of his trauma experience. Now, I'm not here to diagnose DMX and say he has PTSD by any means, but it does sound like he has a history of trauma. And also from the things that we have seen as his fans, whether through his music or in interviews, things that we've heard on the news. Of course, not all of those are going to be true, but entertainment news, I mean. Of course, not all of those are going to be true, but it certainly gives a lot of indication that DMX did have a history of trauma. Now, I think it's very important for us as people to understand the lived experience of trauma, to really, really get it. Already, there are a lot of negative videos and comments out there about his passing and just a lot of uneducated criticism. Now, it's really important because so many people in this life, in this world that we encounter do have a trauma background. It's really important for us to understand what trauma can look like. So again, if you haven't watched that video, please take a look at those below. I really wanted to share actual clips of the video his sister made, but YouTube can be very quick to delete or remove a video that, that isn't your work, based on copyright rules and fair use rules and all of that. So if you've noticed in some of my past videos, like I did a reaction video to a Netflix show, I did show clips of the show, but I didn't have any audio. Another reaction video I did for Netflix, again, I verbally shared quotes from the show rather than putting in clips. And for an HBO reaction video I just kind of talked about it. So I will, as much as I really want to share the video, clips of her message in this video, just to stay safe, I'm not going to. But please guys, take a look at the video, because I certainly am not going to be able to do justice to the things that she said, and it's really important stuff for us to know. So she starts by talking about some things that DMX shared with her about his background. She talks about DMX when he was very young. She didn't say at what age, but she said that when he was very young, his mother took him to a children's home, telling him that it was for a visit, and she left him there. So his mother abandoned him there. He was too young to really understand what was happening and to really defend himself. Guys, something that I speak about in my videos is how much trauma affects our brain. Trauma structurally affects our brain, and when it happens to children, it actually affects their brain development. Our brain, research says, continues to develop to about the age of 24, 25, and the brain development of children under the age of 5 is extremely susceptible to environmental factors, and trauma has a very big impact on how that child's brain is going to develop. So I don't know how old DMX was at the time, but regardless of that, he was a child. He was brought to this children's home and now is trying to learn how to navigate his world in this, unknown environment, an environment that's going to be perceived as very unsafe for him. Children are extremely dependent on adults. They're dependent on adults for their very survival. So even that in of itself can lead to major trauma from the perspective of a child. A child's world is entirely based on their primary caregivers. So when that primary caregiver takes them somewhere and leaves them, no word of when she's coming back. Guys, it's difficult to put ourselves in that child's perspective, but even if you just consider it, that is a very scary and painful thing. Let's try to imagine for a second being a child, right? First of all, as human beings, we have certain needs and fears in common. So we have a need for social belonging, for instance. If you think from an evolutionary standpoint, it's very important for us to belong to a particular community or to feel accepted by those around us, because those that are rejected by their community, by their society, are then at risk when it comes to their survival. So we all share in common that need for social acceptance. Now, a child particularly has a strong need for that from their parents. Now, as a child, it sounds like DMX experienced that abandonment and rejection at a very young age. Now, let's think about how a child might handle that, right? When you are in an environment that feels unsafe for you, that feels unreliable, let's say you're in an environment where you're being abused. Now, what would be an adaptive response? Now, each child is different, but for many, something that would be an adaptive response is to be aggressive, okay? So to be aggressive, whether it's, you're like other peers, other children that are, making you feel unsafe, whether it's adults. So being aggressive to defend yourself, to appear very strong, right? That could be one way that someone deals with it. Now, what happens when that child is now taken to a different environment, or that child is now older? Let's say they're now in a safe environment, but remember, their brain has learned my world is unsafe, and how I protect myself is to be aggressive. Perhaps being aggressive actually was something that helped them. Now that behavior is reinforced, right? So if I'm aggressive, no one's going to mess with me. People are less likely to hurt me. So they go into a new environment where they're safe, and what was once an adaptive behavior is now maladaptive. But because the experiences of being hurt or neglected were so strong, it's hard for the brain to then realize, okay, I need to change this response. I can behave differently. Because no, our brain is wired to ensure our survival. So our brain is going to think, I remember having this major experience that threatened my survival, and I'm not going to let it happen again. So the brain's not registering that it's in a safe environment now. It's now seeing the world from the lens of trauma. So the child will continue to act out aggressively. That child grows into an adult, and that adult continues to act out aggressively. And one of the things that we saw with DMX is that he did have a very aggressive persona, and that was one of the things that people may have been critical of him about. But it's important for us to know where it's coming from, and especially for others in life that we may encounter who have come across as aggressive. Is this video a way for us to say that people can be excused for their behaviors? Absolutely not. But it is important for us to understand where certain things come from. His sister talks about for herself, being invited to stay at a friend's house. So it sounds like, she was a child as well who didn't have a stable home environment. So when people would invite her to stay at their house, then their brothers or their fathers would then try to mess with her. Now imagine what that teaches someone, okay, especially the young mind. The young mind is now learning. So on one hand, someone does something good for you, but something evil, something hurtful, abusive can come from that. So now I need to be on guard when someone is inviting me into something that seems good, or someone that's making an offer to me that can seem like it's a good thing. I actually just need to be careful, because at any moment the other shoe could drop. They could actually be luring me into an unsafe situation. Someone starts to internalize those messages. Now consider how then it would affect their social relationships. She then goes into talking about how, after those sort of experiences, you can come across as very angry and overly aggressive to other people. And so she says that people then try to find whatever they can to cope, right? And that's where she starts to talk about how a person can then find that peace, that coping, in substance abuse. Now, it can be very easy for us to be, those of us who haven't dealt with addictions or addiction specifically to drugs and alcohol, to be very critical of this. But it's important for us to remember, a traumatized person who was once a traumatized child, where would they have learned healthy coping skills from? So as children learn how to cope with anxiety, the stressors of life, from their parents primarily, right? And if their parents didn't give them that foundational knowledge, then let's say they start to get older, maybe they don't learn it from their peers or their other, adults in their life. Where would they learn that from? What they know is that they have such deep-rooted pain and they just want peace. And so it can be very, drugs and alcohol can be very alluring. She talks about how she is still fighting those personal demons from what she went through, from her trauma experiences. She says that she's so fearful of finding any level of peace in alcohol and drug use, that's why she won't even get started. Because really, the best way to deal with drug and alcohol abuse is to not get started to begin with. She also talks about how she learned how not to sleep based on her experiences in the foster care system and all the trauma that she went through. Now, guys, I talk about that quite a bit in all of my trauma and PTSD videos. I talk about how it affects our sleep. One of the criteria in the DSM-5, so again, that's the diagnostic manual that us mental health clinicians use to understand and diagnose and treat mental health disorders. One of the criteria it mentions for PTSD is sleep disturbance. And one of the ways that, again, trauma can manifest is in having difficulty sleeping, like having nightmares. It can be difficult to fall asleep. It can be difficult to stay asleep. And I talk about how our brain actually interprets that when we're sleeping, it is an unsafe period. So we need to stay awake. We need to be hypervigilant at all times to ensure our own safety. I also talk about how if you know that your nights sleeping are pretty much marred by nightmares, why would you want to go to sleep? It can create anxiety for you in even trying to sleep, because you know what's waiting for you on the other side. She also talks about how when you catch someone in your life in any sort of deceit, or they do something that you interpret as them doing you wrong, you're very quick to let go of the relationship. And again, another criteria within the DSM-5 speaks to the impact of social relationships. One of the things I talk about a lot is how our experiences in life, whether that's trauma, grief, anxiety, depression, being tired, being, just hungry, those things create the lens that we use to navigate our lives for that day, okay? Now, trauma, when you've gone through it, especially when you've had multiple traumas, it affects the lens you use to go through the rest of your life, pretty much. It's very difficult for you to integrate new experiences of safety when you have, that history of trauma. So she talks about how, you're very quick to let go of those relationships. And that's why one of the types of treatment I talk about is cognitive behavioral therapy. It really targets the thoughts that we have because going through trauma will lead to you developing certain core beliefs. Now, those are going to be core beliefs about you, your value, your world, people around you, right? And in those core beliefs, you develop certain rules for living. So, it's quick ways for kind of like you can say mental formulas for how to deal with things in life to keep yourself safe. And from there, we also have these negative automatic thoughts. So two people can be in a situation and interpret it very differently. And that's based on those negative automatic thoughts. And so that's where you may find a lot of conflict in interpersonal relationships based on how you're interpreting what the person is saying, what the person is doing. And, I mention it in a lot of videos that cognitive behavioral therapy is one of those things that's really good for that. It teaches us how to examine our thoughts, which then affects our emotions and allows us to be able to choose actions that are going to be most helpful to us. So again, if you're dealing with people in your life where you're finding that they just seem to be easily triggered, they're misunderstanding your intentions, and it's not always the case, but one of the things that could be at play is that, their interpretations of what's happening is influenced by traumatic or adverse experiences that they've had in the past. And that goes well beyond that particular exchange with you. So she explains also that even though her heart is hurting right now, she's thankful that her brother is now at peace. And she talks a lot about the foster care system. Guys, I had a very brief stint working in child protection, and I didn't last long. I did not last long. And, the foster care system for a lot of provinces, states, countries is a very broken one. It's a very, very broken system. And foster care children go through a lot. There are a lot of foster children and not a lot of good, healthy homes that are there for them, supporting them for the right reasons. Now, she talks about, being a foster child and being in homes where they're only there for a check. Now imagine or just consider what that can look like, right? For a child who is in a home with a family, knowing that they are not caring for them because they truly care for them, but because it's for money. Imagine the abuse and neglect, whether it's physical or emotional, that could be happening to that child. Imagine what that child is learning about their value. Now, something that most, if not all of you know, is that foster care families are typically temporary, right? A lot of times children go from home to home to home. One little mistake can have a child removed from a home into another environment. So you may find if you're working with abused, neglected children, or you're just even encountering them, that they may do a lot of things that you feel are them testing you. But children want to know, will you be there for me no matter what? Can I trust you to stay? Can I emotionally invest in you? Can I emotionally feel safe? Are you going to turn away from me and reject me when I make a mistake? So children have to constantly be on guard about their behavior and trying to meet an unrealistic standard of perfection, okay, that even adults, we can't meet, right? And those children that have gone through it enough come to a point where they don't trust that anyone is going to accept them unconditionally. And so they are going to exhibit a lot of behaviors to find out, if you really do care about them. Children, guys, are not difficult to work with. Children are not difficult to understand. What they want is unconditional positive regard and acceptance, okay? So if we in this world, a lot of things are very conditional. Our approval of people is very conditional. So if we're showing that to a child, especially an abused, neglected, traumatized child, that our acceptance of them is based on particular conditions, what does that teach that child about their value, their worth? She talks about DMX now entering the entertainment industry where they're only nice to him, at least it was perceived that they're only nice to him based on the fact that he's a commodity. He's making the money, his talent, right? So even there, he's not going to feel safe. Even there, the acceptance and approval is based on meeting particular conditions. So imagine the kind of pain that would exist for someone. Once you've been through certain types of trauma or you've had multiple traumas, that is something that becomes a daily experience for you. It's not just in the past. It's very easy for people to say, so you've been through trauma, we've all gone through some stuff, get over it. It does not work that way, guys. The human brain does not work that way. That trauma stays with you every single day. And not only that, but your new experiences are marked by a lot of pain. And so she does mention that there are people, thank God, that there were people who supported him, people who were rooting for him and that he could talk to. And I'm so thankful that he had that. I do wonder if he experienced that in childhood, if he ever came to a point where he had a stable, loving home. But she does speak to, and this is something that is accurate, that once the pain becomes so deep, which trauma does lead to some very deep pain, it doesn't go away. Even when you have people who love and support you, that pain is still there, but it is still important for people to show you that caring and be there for you. She talks about how her foster children, all they really want for a lot of them is just to find some peace and to find a family that is really theirs, a family that truly accepts them, that will be there for them, lifelong. Because for many of us, that is a very simple, basic need. And it's something that, we don't even have to question it. But for a lot of children in this world, they don't have that. So something that comes so easily for others, they don't have, okay? Even when we look at the foster care system, lots of people want the babies. They want the infants, they want the toddlers who haven't gone through very much, right? And as these children go through the system, they experience abuse upon abuse, neglect upon neglect, right? Which is going to cause even more psychological injury to them. And then each family that they deal with, they don't want to deal with the results of this, of what adults have done to these children. And once children reach the age of adolescence, it becomes even more difficult to place them in a home. Because a lot of families just don't want them. And for children who are minorities, that's even more difficult for them to find a placement. For male children, that's even more difficult. So these are things that are really important for us to know and be aware of and really consider. Foster children are a population and really not even just foster children, but abused, traumatized children are a population that I have a very deep caring for. And if any of you watching have considered fostering, adopting, please really think about it. Really think about how to support. And if you feel you have the emotional capacity beyond the physical resources to care for them, and if you do, please consider the children that are less likely to be placed, okay? And that is the adolescents. Now, the adolescents and the teenagers. But again, be sure that you have the resources emotionally and physically to do so, because it's not going to be easy. And one of the most painful things that happens to children is to be rejected from a home that initially allowed them entry. Now, even beyond fostering, there are a lot of other things we can do to support adolescents and teens, whether it's volunteering in different capacities, whether it's supporting them financially, whatever way you decide that you want to do. Just really be aware that people in general, and especially children, if you see certain behaviors from them you don't like, it's not, and a lot of times it's not malicious. For some people it is, right? But a lot of times it's not malicious and it's not even about you. It's them trying to, deal with their past experiences, trying to cope with it, trying to use the skills that at one point were helpful, were adaptive, to keep themselves safe, trying to use those skills now in the present time based on their perception of whether or not they're safe and secure. So yeah, those are just things that are really important for us to think about. So guys, again, take a look at the videos I left links for below. Again, one is what is PTSD, and one is, I think it's what trauma looks like. I can't even remember the title at this point, guys, but I posted the 3 videos below. One, there's a part 1 that's split into 2 pieces, and then there's a part 2 that's in one video. And I really go more into depth of what trauma and even specifically PTSD looks like for adults that you may encounter. So if you want to have a bit more understanding, a bit more knowledge about that, please take a look at those below. So yeah, my prayer is going to be for DMX's soul, for his spirit, that he is now at peace. I thank God for allowing us to even just know a part of him, that his talent, his artistry was shared with this world. He has left his mark here. There will never be another DMX. And so while his life was likely a painful one for him, DMX really made a difference in a positive way in this world. So yeah, like I'm thankful that despite what he's gone through, he was willing to share a part of himself with us. So yeah, guys, please take a look at his sister's video that I'm linking below. Hopefully the video stays there. If it's removed at some point, I have no control over that because it is from another channel. But yeah, if you can, just take a look at the video to get an understanding of, you know, who he was from her perspective, what he's been through, and also to understand trauma as well. But yeah, guys, if you like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, share it with anyone you feel like could benefit from this. And also, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. Your membership means a lot. And yeah, guys, if you have any comments or questions, post them below. But anyways, that's it for today. And I will catch you guys at the next video.